All right, welcome to part two to week 3, English 123. In the last video, I said there was going to be 3 videos, but I just feel that I can do it in 2. This one will maybe go a little longer than the last one, but I think I can do it in 2. We're just going to be talking about the structure of the essay, structure of your argument paper, and we're going to be talking about primarily, I want to emphasize the use of your sources in your paper. How do we do that? There's going to be a lot that we're going to be talking about, so keep in mind this is pertaining to the writing of the essay as a whole. It's a overall overview of essay writing, but I want to make specific emphasis on sources and also on thesis statement, because that's what's coming up for this week. So this is going to apply, this PowerPoint you can use for the whole session, and I'm going to be referring to it quite frequently. In fact, you might hear me say or repeat things often from this, because these are just the fundamentals. These are the essentials of essay writing. So I'm going to give you the fundamentals now. That way you can see how everything that comes now applies to this methodology. Okay, so you'll be able to see how the sources and thesis statement plug into the overall picture of the essay. Okay, and I might speak a little quickly because I want to get as much in as I can within 15 minutes. Okay, so if you need time, just pause this video for right now and bring up the PowerPoint that I included for this week. So go ahead and hit pause and then come back. All right, so what we're going to be looking at for this PowerPoint, you can see here there's not a whole lot of graphics. It's just black and white. So it just serves the purposes of just communicating those essentials. So we have essay essentials on our title page. Page 2, essay introduction. Now I know this is off topic for this week, but it applies to this class. Essay introduction. Introduction of your essay is very important. It really is the beginning. It's not just the beginning of your essay, but it's really the start of the reader in really coming in contact or encountering the topic that you're going to be discussing. It may be the first time they've ever even considered this information or even read anything about this. You have to kind of assume that they don't really know much. They may know very little, but they may not know anything at all about what you're writing. It just depends. It's really hard to guess what your reader might know. So it's their first point of contact with the reader. You're introducing this new topic to them. Okay, so the introduction should orient the reader to the context and background of the argument made in the essay. So it should provide some kind of orientation, some understanding of the context and the background information that surrounds what you're going to be talking about. It doesn't start off with exactly what you're going to be talking about. It starts off with everything that's behind it. What's the overall context and the background of what you're going to be discussing and arguing? Okay? You should enable the reader to, in a sense or metaphorically, shake hands with the topic or the argument. Metaphorical. Like if two people are introduced to one another, there's usually a handshake that takes place. Hi, this is my friend so-and-so, this is my friend so-and-so. And you know, if you introduce someone to a friend, they typically shake hands. They've never met before, so in a way, you're having your reader shake hands with your paper. Okay, it's a good way to look at it. So the introduction should have a smooth progression from the slightly broad context of the topic. It's broader than your thesis. It's broader than what you're really dealing with in the essay, slightly in the introduction. And then it narrows down smoothly, narrows down to the thesis statement. The thesis statement is the ultimate argument that you're making. It's the claim that you're making, but it's also the conclusion of the introduction paragraph. It's the conclusion of the background information. So as you're providing the background information, the broad context, it narrows down, narrows down, narrows down, and then there's typically, which I prefer, a therefore statement or a therefore cue to the reader that here is the thesis. Therefore, in light of everything I've said prior, we can argue, or one may argue, such and such. Okay? So a good visual for this is to think of an inverted triangle. Inverted triangle, it's broad at the top and it slightly narrows down to thesis statement. So keep that in mind as you're working on the introduction later on, but it may not seem applicable now, but it will be, and it does relate in a way to sources. Okay, so once we have our introduction, we have the thesis statement or the claim. It's the claim, the thesis, the argument, those are all interchangeable. The thesis statement is the central argument to the essay. It is the one main point of the argument. It's the overarching idea. It's the nucleus of the paper, really. Okay? It's the whole point of you even writing the paper. Every detail, and this gets overlooked very easily, but every detail in the essay must, it's not should or could, it must support and relate to the thesis statement. Another visual for this is think of a bicycle wheel. You have the spokes, you have the wheel itself, and then you have the hub. The thesis is the hub. Everything else ties into that thesis statement. If it doesn't belong. So keep that in mind. Digressions are very easy in these types of papers. So be aware of digressions and try to eliminate them as much as possible. Okay, so to ensure an effective and well-organized essay, utilize the thesis statement that highlights the key points, the what you will be discussing. So this gives, this ties into what we're going to be discussing this week, or what the assignments are discussing this week for thesis statement. You want to kind of foreshadow or kind of give a foretaste, an advertisement of what you're going to be arguing in the paper, and the points of support that you'll be using. So I kind of give you some lead-ins, some tie-ins to how to do that. Therefore, this essay will demonstrate that XYZ. Therefore, in light of XYZ, one may argue. Therefore, one may assert that XYZ supports. Okay, so those are some examples. There's a much more definitive example in our assignments for this week. If you look at the course activities, when it's talking about the thesis statement should have at least 3 sections to show what you are arguing, the what, why you are arguing it, and how you will do so. Okay, so the what you are arguing is really the claim that you're making. The why you're arguing it is the significance, and the how is really some of the main points that you will be using to support that. Okay, now in our example, the curriculum writers used the first person. I will argue. I prefer you don't use first person. I prefer you use third person, which is one, or not second person either, but one may argue. This this essay will attempt to argue. This essay will attempt, this paper, or this essay usually works best. This essay will attempt to argue. Try to avoid first person. It really does, I believe, lessen the credibility of the paper to a degree, because this is not your original research. This is, as we said, you're utilizing other experts in your paper. So you're using their ideas to support your argument. So it's always best to, I think, use third person to maintain that formality and to maintain that credibility. So, but these two things here, the 3 sections that show what, why, and how are very important. So you want to follow the format, the formula that's been provided in our course activities, and that will help you develop an effective thesis statement in conjunction with what I've given you here. Therefore, this essay will demonstrate. Therefore, in light of, one may argue. Therefore, one may assert. So that's the third person that we're bringing in here. So you may combine these from this slide and from the examples given in the course activities. You can combine this together to formulate your own thesis. But the the what, the why, and the how are essential to a thesis statement. Okay, um, and the how directly correlates to your sources, the information, the main points. Typically three main points, that will make up your paper. Three overarching points that may have subpoints to them, but you can highlight those. You can highlight those, as I said here, to ensure an effective and well-organized thesis. The essay will utilize a thesis statement that highlights the key points in the argument of the essay. Okay, so very important to utilize your key points from your sources in your thesis statement. If you have any questions about that, please email me directly and I can provide more clarification. So then moving on, so you've presented your thesis statement of what you are arguing, why you're arguing it, and how you will argue it. So then the how correlates really with the topic sentences, okay? And I know I have here the what, but really that's the what here is really the point that you're making, okay? The point you're making here in your topic sentence is the point of support that correlates with your thesis statement. So the topic sentence of your paragraph is a point, a what, that supports the thesis statement of your essay. Okay, so it plugs into your thesis. Think of Greek columns. So if you look at this graphic here of the Parthenon, all of these Greek columns are supporting the upper layer or level, the frieze that goes around the whole Parthenon. It's all supporting that. So if you think of your topic sentences as these Greek columns, that may give you a visual that can kind of help put that together. The top portion is the thesis statement. The bottom portion, the foundation, is the conclusion. And all the columns that go around the Parthenon are all similar in function to topic sentences. It all supports the structure. All right, moving on. So then once you've provided your topic sentence, you want to explain the point that you're making. You want to explicate that. You want to discuss what does it mean, why is it significant, how does it relate to the thesis statement. Those questions are important to help the reader understand what's being said in the paper. Again, moving on. Incorporating the supportive material. Now this is where this coincides with your assignment for this week in terms of your annotated bibliography. How do you enhance your credibility? How do you make yourself a credible writer? Well, it's by integrating your sources into your paper. So there's three ways of integrating your sources. First, there's direct quotes, summarizing, and then paraphrasing. Direct quotes is the most, I'd say, potent way of doing it. You're providing a direct word-for-word quotation of what the source says, okay? You want to start out, the first time you use a source, I would say maybe the first 1 to 2 times at least, direct quotes. You may, at your discretion for further supportive material from that author, or that critic, use paraphrases and summaries. But they have less potency, they have less credibility because it's not their exact words, okay? You got to determine when and how to use paraphrasing and summary, but they are there as tools. They're not used maybe as often, but direct quotes are the specific direct words from the source, which carries the most strength, I would say. But it's just up to you as your paper develops. On maybe in a particular point of support, you can maybe paraphrase and it may be more effective. It just has to be kind of determined by you at your discretion on what you feel is the best way of getting the point across. Now, if you need help with this, please let me know, of course, and I can maybe direct you on how, maybe provide me the quote, and I can maybe walk through the process with you of how to maybe paraphrase that or summarize it. But those are the 3 main ways. So you want to provide that supportive material within your paper, within your paragraphs, to support those topic sentences, because you don't want to rely too heavy on your sources, and you don't want to not utilize them. You got to incorporate them. You have to um, uh, use them to build yourself as a credible uh, as a credible academic writer. Your credibility depends upon the sources that you use. So as you incorporate them, as you bring them into your paper, that is going to build up your ethos as an academic writer. So the more skillful you are at quoting, paraphrasing, and summarizing, the more credibility you will have as an academic writer, an academic critic. But you want to utilize, of course, credible sources, as we discussed. Those are peer-reviewed academic journals, books that are published by academic institutions such as Oxford or Cambridge or UCLA, USC. Basically a research university. So there's international research universities such as University of Paris, University of Tokyo. There's universities in Germany, Switzerland. So any research university that publishes uh, articles in journals or books, that is information that you want to use. That is academically specific information. If you find something on Google, it's not academically specific. You can use it as an anecdote, but it doesn't have academic credibility. It hasn't gone through the specific protocol for ensuring academic accuracy. There's a specific process in place for these professors and these doctors that write for journals. It's very stringent. It's very controlled. So, not to say that it's 100% truth. We don't necessarily have to agree with it, but it's accepted as academic. Okay, Google, you know, news organizations, different types of organizations that put out articles aren't necessarily credible. They haven't necessarily have the credibility to um, really have academic weight. Even sometimes even PhDs that maybe might go out on their own and publish an article on their own, or publish a book, say through Google Self-Publish, that still lacks academic credibility because it hasn't gone through the specific process of peer review. So anything that's peer reviewed, anything that belongs to an academic journal that is peer reviewed, anything that belongs to a research university, such as Cambridge or Oxford or Harvard or Yale or one of the Ivy League schools, Stanford University, University of Chicago, anything like that, UCLA, UC Berkeley, those are fine. Claremont University as well. So anything that's a research university that's part of the academy. Okay, anything outside of that can be used as an illustration, can be used as an anecdote. That's really as much as you can use it. You can use it as an illustration or something to build a bridge into more concrete, a more credible, concrete source, but you can't use them in place of an academic source. So when you're using your sources, you want to avoid abrupt quotations. You want to introduce your quote to the reader. You want to help them to see, you want to cue them to the quote coming up. You want to utilize introductory phrases to prepare the reader to help them understand the connections you're attempting to make. And you can use that typically by phrases like, for example, XYZ states. For example, according to XYZ. So anything like that is going to help the reader to understand. Now, the first time you're using a source, you want to provide the author's first and last name, the title of the article or book, and a little background information about that, and then the quote. The second time you quote from that source, you don't need all that information, you just need the author's last name. Okay? So, first time you use it, you need to introduce it and support it, discuss its credibility. Second, third, fourth time you use it, it's just the author's last name. Okay? But you definitely use these introductory phrases. You don't have to necessarily use "for example." It helps, but you don't want to overuse it. But definitely, according to, you know, Dr. So-and-so states, according to Dr. So-and-so, those are important cues to help the reader see that there's a quote. Because sometimes you have a paragraph of, of information, and then all of a sudden there's a quote there. There's quotations, and it runs for 3 lines, and then end quote, and then it just continues on. It's like nothing's said, nothing's discussed about that quote. It's just been dropped in. So you might see on some of the feedback I give you that it might say no drop quotes or avoid drop quoting. So be sure to introduce your quotes into the paragraph as your point of support. Okay. Moving on here to the next slide. This is really just talking about analyzing your quote, emphasizing the significance of the quote, answering that why question as to why you've used the source, why is that source important. You must address the why question. It is important to emphasize the significance of your supportive material to help the reader follow your logic. They must understand where you're going with the argument and why you use that source, why you've quoted that material, why you paraphrased that material. Do not leave it up to the reader to figure it out on their own. It is the writer's responsibility to make clear connections. Be sure that your writing is making a clear connection between what's been quoted and why it's there and how it relates to the topic sentence. Utilize phrases like these in discussing the supportive material. This is significant because, this is noteworthy because, XYZ is important because. Okay, so those are some examples you can use, but it's important to direct the reader's attention to significance, how you're using it, when something's being used, how does that relate to this. So making all those particular connections for the reader helps them understand what you are trying to communicate. Moving on, conclusions and transitions. This is speaking of with the paragraph itself. You want to conclude your paragraphs when necessary, when it's appropriate. Conclusional phrases can be used such as therefore, hence, thus, clearly. Transitions are important between paragraphs, moving from one paragraph to the next. You want to draw that connection between the two. Well, you want to provide a clear conclusion in your paragraph. It will help you smoothly transition to the next paragraph or point. So use phrases like additionally, in addition to, or moreover, or furthermore. It just helps everything stay glued together. Think of Legos. It's like snaps together, snap together. Snap your paragraphs together. Transition between them. Then lastly, the essay conclusion, the final conclusion. It's a summary of your points. It's a summary of how they and why they support the thesis statement. The conclusion should mirror the thesis statement. It should be like those Greek columns. The top, the roof, the foundation, Greek columns, the foundation and the thesis statement mirror one another. And you want to avoid making any additional claims after the conclusion. It's done. Once you conclude, it's over, and it's up to the reader whether or not they accept or consider what you've had to say. So that is the essay structure. That's how it relates to sources and thesis statement. Continue to utilize this PowerPoint throughout the rest of the course. It will be very valuable to you, and I'll be referring to it very often. It's basically the structure of what we're after in this class. So I did go a little longer than I expected, but if you have any questions, again, please just let me know. Email me directly, and I'll be happy to help you and to help guide you along through this process. All right. You have a great day. Thank you for watching.